The Himyarite Kingdom, or Himyar, historically referred to as the Homerite Kingdom by the Greeks and the Romans, was a kingdom in ancient Yemen, established in 110 BCE. It took as its capital the ancient city of Zafar, to be followed at the beginning of the 4th century by what is the modern-day city of Saba. The kingdom conquered neighbouring Saba in c. 25 BCE, Qataban in c. 200 CE, and Hadramawt c. 300 CE. Its political fortunes relative to Saba changed frequently until it finally conquered the Sabaean kingdom around 280. Himyar then endured until it finally fell to Axumite invaders in 525. History. The Himyarite Kingdom was the dominant polity in Arabia until 525. Its economy was based on agriculture, and foreign trade centered on the export of frankincense and myrrh. For many years, the kingdom was also the major intermediary linking East Africa and the Mediterranean world. This trade largely consisted of exporting ivory from Africa to be sold in the Roman Empire. Ships from Himyar regularly traveled the East African coast, and the state also exerted a large amount of influence, both cultural, religious and political, over the trading cities of East Africa, whilst the cities of East Africa remained independent. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea describes the trading empire of Himyar and its ruler Charabael, who is said to have been on friendly terms with Rome. 23. And after 9 days more there is Zafar, the metropolis, in which lives Charabael, lawful king of 2 tribes, the Homerites and those living next to them, called the Sabaites. Through continual embassies and gifts, he is a friend of the emperors. Early period. During this period, the kingdom of Himyar conquered the kingdoms of Saba and Qataban and took Raden, Zafar, for its capital instead of Marib. Therefore, they have been called Du-Raden. In the early 2nd century CE, Saba and Qataban split from the kingdom of Himyar, yet in a few decades Qataban was conquered by Hadramawt, whereas Saba was finally conquered by Himyar in the late 3rd century. Zafar's ruins still lie on Mudnoir mountain near the town of Yaram. During this period, they began to decline and fall. Their trade failed to a very great extent. Firstly, because of the Nabatean domain over the north of Hijaz. Secondly, because of the Roman superiority over the naval trade routes after the Roman conquest of Egypt, Syria and the north of Hijaz. And thirdly, because of intertribal warfare. Thanks to the 3 above-mentioned factors, families of Khaten were disunited and scattered about all over Arabia. Jewish monarchy. The Himyarite kings appear to have abandoned polytheism and converted to Judaism around the year 380. Several decades after the conversion of the Ethiopian kingdom of Axum to Christianity, though no changes occurred in its script, calendar, or language. This date marks the end of an era in which numerous inscriptions record the names and deeds of kings, and dedicate buildings to local and major gods. From the 380s, temples were abandoned and dedications to the old gods ceased, replaced by references to Ramanan, the Lord of Heaven or Lord of Heaven and Earth. The political context for this conversion may have been Arabia's interest in maintaining neutrality and good trade relations with the competing empires of Christian Byzantium and Zoroastrian Persia. One of the first Jewish kings, Tubar Abu Kariba Esad, is believed to have converted following a military expedition into northern Arabia in an effort to eliminate Byzantine influence. The Byzantine emperors had long eyed the Arabian Peninsula and sought to control the lucrative spice trade en route to India. The Byzantines hoped to establish a protectorate by converting the inhabitants to Christianity. city. Some progress had been made in northern Arabia but with little success in Himyar. Abu Kariba's forces reached Yathrib and, meeting no resistance, they passed through the city, leaving the king's son behind as governor. Abu Kariba soon received news that the people of Yathrib had killed his son. He turned back in order to wreak vengeance on the city. After cutting down the palm trees from which the inhabitants derived the main income, he laid siege to the city. The Jews of Yathrib fought side by side with the pagan neighbors. During the siege, Abu Kariba fell severely ill. Two Jewish scholars in Yathrib, Karab and Asad by name, called on the king in his camp and used the knowledge of medicine to restore him to health. While attending the king, they pleaded with him to lift the siege and make peace. The Shah's appeal is said to have persuaded Abu Kariba. He called off his attack and also embraced Judaism along with his entire army. At his insistence, the two Jewish scholars accompanied the Himyarite king back to his capital, where he demanded that all his people convert to Judaism. Initially, there was great resistance, but after an ordeal had justified the king's demand and confirmed the truth of the Jewish faith, many Himyarites embraced Judaism. Some historians argue that the conversions were not due to political motivations, but that Judaism, by its philosophical, simplistic and austere nature, was attractive to the nature of the Semitic people. Abu Kariba continued to engage in military campaigns and met his death under unclear circumstances. Some scholars believe that his own soldiers killed him. He left three sons, Hassan, Amru, and Zora, all of whom were minors at the time. After Abu Kariba's demise, a pagan named Dushantir seized the throne. In the reign of Subabi Yakov, the son of Abu Karib Asad of certain Azkir, a Christian missionary from Najran, was put to death after he had erected a chapel with a cross. Christian sources interpret the event as a martyrdom at Jewish hands. The site for his execution, Najran, being said to have been chosen on the advice of a rabbi, but indigenous sources do not mention persecutions on the grounds of faith, and it may have been merely to deter the extension of Byzantine influence. The first Axumite invasion took place sometime in the 5th century and was triggered by the murder of some Byzantine merchants. Two Christian sources, including the Zuchnan Chronicle, once attributed to Dionysius I, tell Maharoyo, which was written over 3 centuries later. The Himyarite king motivated the killings by stating, "This is because in the countries of the Romans the Christians wickedly harass the Jews who live in the countries and kill many of them. Therefore I am putting these men to death." Quote, in retaliation, the Axumites invaded the land and thereafter established a bishopric and built Christian churches in Zafar. The Jewish monarchy in Himyar ended with the reign of Yusuf, known as Dunuwas, who in 523 attacked the Christian population of Najran. By the year 500, on the eve of the regency of Mahdilan Yanuf, the kingdom of Himyar exercised control over much of the Arabian Peninsula. It was during his reign that the Himyarite Kingdom began to become a tributary state of Axum, the process concluding by the time of the reign of Mardikarib Yafa, a Christian appointed by the Axumites. A coup d'etat ensued, with Dunuwas, who had attempted to overthrow the dynasty several years earlier, assuming authority after killing the Axumite garrison in Zafar. He then proceeded to engage the Ethiopian Guards and the Christian allies in the Tihama coastal lowlands facing Abyssinia, after taking the port of Mukarwan, where he burnt down the local church, and advanced south as far as the fortress of Madaban overlooking the Bab el-Mandeb, where he expected Caleb el-Asbeth to land his fleet. The campaign eventually killed between 11,500 and 14,000, and took a similar number of prisoners. Mukarwan became his base, while he dispatched one of his generals, a Jewish prince by the name of Shera-i-Yakbul-du-Yazan, against Najran. a predominantly Christian oasis with a good number of Jews who had supported with troops his earlier rebellion, but refused to recognize his authority after the massacre of the Axumite garrison. The general blocked the caravan route connecting Najran with eastern Arabia. Religious culture. During this period, references to pagan gods disappeared from royal inscriptions and texts on public buildings, and were replaced by references to a single deity. Inscriptions in the Sabine language, and sometimes Hebrew, called this deity Rahman, Lord of the heavens and earth, the God of Israel, and Lord of the Jews. Quote, prayers invoking Rahman's blessings on the people of Israel often ended with the Hebrew words Shalom and Amen. There is evidence that the solar goddess Shams was especially favored in Himyar, being the national goddess and possibly an ancestral deity. Ancestral divisions of Himyar. Himyar, the most famous of whose septs were Zaid al-Jamhur, Banu Quda and Sakasik. Karlan, the most famous of whose septs were Hamdan, Azd, Anmar, Ayy, Midlaj, Kinda, Lakham, Judam. Karlan septs emigrated from Yemen to dwell in the different parts of the Arabian Peninsula prior to the Great Flood. Due to the failure of trade under the Roman pressure and domain on both sea and land trade routes following Roman occupation of Egypt and Syria. Naturally enough, the competition between Karlan and Himyar led to the evacuation of the first and the settlement of the second in Yemen. The emigrating septs of Karlan can be divided into four groups. Azd, who, under the leadership of Imran bin Amr Muzikbar, wandered into Yemen, sent pioneers and finally headed northwards. Details of their emigration can be summed up as follows. Thalaba bin Amr left his tribe Al-Azd for Ages and dwelt between Thalibia and Dhiqar. When he gained strength, he headed for Medina where he stayed. Of his seed are Aws and Khazraj, sons of Haritha bin Thalaba. Haritha bin Amr, known as Khazraj, wandered with his people in Hijaz until they came to Mar, Arizona Zaran. They conquered the Aram, and settled in Makkah after having driven away its people, the tribe of Juram. Imran bin Amr and his folks went to Oman where they established the tribe of Azd, whose children inhabited Tihama and were known as Azd of Shana. Jaffna bin Amr and his family headed for Syria where he settled and initiated the kingdom of Ghassan, who was surnamed after a spring of water in Hijaz, where they stopped on the way to Syria. Lakham and Judam, of whom was Nasr bin Rabra, father of Manadira, kings of Hira. Banu Ayy, who also emigrated northwards to settle by the so-called Ajah and Salma mountains, which were consequently named as Tai Mountains. The tribe later became the tribe of Shama, Kinda, who dwelt in Bahrain but were expelled to Hadramaut and Najd where they instituted a powerful government, but not for long, for the whole tribe soon faded away. Another tribe of Himyar, known as Banu Quda, also left Yemen and dwelt in Samawa on the borders of Iraq. However, the majority of the Himyar Christian royalty migrated into Jordan, Al-Kharik, where initially they were known as Banu Himyar. They later on moved to central Jordan to settle in Madaba under the family name of Al-Hamana. Language. It is a matter of debate whether the Himyarite language was spoken in the southwestern Arabian Peninsula until the 10th century. Bibliography. Alessandro de Maigret. Arabia Felix. Translated Rebecca Thompson. London, Stacey International, 2002. ISBN 1-9009888070. Andrei Korotayev. Ancient Yemen. Oxford. Oxford University Press, 1995. ISBN 0-19-922237-1. Andrei Korotayev. Pre-Islamic Yemen. Wiesbaden, Harrisowitz Verlag, 1996. ISBN 3-447-03679-6. Bafaki, M.A. Lunification du Yemen antique. Le Ladontre Saba, Himyar la Hadram Ordraia Oemi Sicle de Elia Chrétien. Paris, 1990. Paul Yule, Himyar late antique Yemen, Dispatantike im Yemen-Ite World, 2007, ISBN 978-3-92929-0-356. Paul Yule, Zafar, the capital of the ancient Himyarite Empire rediscovered. Yemen Report 36, 2005, 22-29. Paul Yule, late antique Arabia Afar, capital of Himyar, rehabilitation of a decadent society. Excavations of the Ruprecht Karls Universität Heidelberg 1998-2010 in the highlands of the Yemen, Abhandlungen Deutsche Orientgesellschaft, Volume 29 Wiesbaden 2013, ISSN 0417-2442, ISBN 978-3-447-06-9359. Joseph Adler, The Jewish Kingdom of Himyar, Its Rise and Fall, Midstream, May, June 2000, Volume XXXXVI, No. 4, R. Stoprik P. Yule, Himyarite period bronze sculptural groups from the Yemenite highlands, in